Okay, now we're going to look at the answers to freedom to operate. The first answer is C. This is definitely a concern. It has an arm, the arm can be positioned, and it has a release mechanism. Again, we're just saying it's a concern. We have to do more detailed analysis to decide whether it actually is a serious freedom to operate threat, but it's definitely a concern at this point. And even if we're doing it slightly differently, our system is different, it may be seen as by a patent examiner as not sufficiently novel, given that this other approach has been patented. That's why you go to experts. The second question, the answer is A, and that's because the patent doesn't mention overhangs. The technology is not focused, this technology is focused on assessing weather using that data for modular assembly of the drone. In the third question, I would take an A or a B. It either is not an issue because the focus is on securing the package to the drone and its release, not on getting it under an overhang. So you could have a patent that says that puts it under an overhang with a release mechanism, the key being how you get under the overhang. But you could argue that, hey, there's a release mechanism here, and if we're using this kind of a release mechanism, we may be infringing that patent. There's certainly a way around it. You just use a different release mechanism, or you license this patent in order to use their release mechanism, which probably means you buy it from them. B is the answer to number 4. It may be a concern, even though the arm is not articulated as an arm on a drone. It may be considered underlying and thus need to be licensed. 5 is A, it's not a concern. Articulating arms are not claimed, even though it may include one in assembly. 6 is A, again, there's no claim about the lock and release system here that we're dealing with, and so we don't have to worry about that. 7 is A, there's no zip line or cable for the delivery on an arm. 8 is A, no zip line with a package is claimed, no cable with a package is claimed. C is definitely a concern, that's the focus of this patent. Or rather, 10, 11, and 12, there's no relevant claims, so we're not worrying about those. So that's what we have as the answers on these. Let's look forward to the value chain. Value chains are about creating value for customers while minimizing risk. The value chain is how you create, make, sell, and support the product or the service. Each step in the value chain is called a value chain because each step creates more value, helps create the value that the customer is seeking from the product or service that they're buying. So we want to think about how we create value. Now, if you don't focus on what the customers and the end users need and want, it's just a matter of dumb luck whether you can create any value. That's why we do that voice of the customer exercise and also the competitive advantage to make sure we're the best ones at creating value as we move through this new product development process. On the other hand, with respect to risk, what risk means is we have to think about where there's a probability that a task or something that's going to be done as part of this value chain, an item that's going to be purchased, for example, can cost more than anticipated, take longer to complete, or if we're selling a product and it gets out in the market, it has a potential to blow up and kill somebody, or a drug could have an adverse impact, or we have to think about these kind of things that can go wrong. So during the value chain, it may not be so dramatic as blowing up and killing somebody, but it may be something like, you ever order something and it never shows up, you're pretty irritated. Well, that lowers the value for you because you got to keep on chasing it to get it delivered. Okay, so risk and value. Risk gets high, harder to get the value high. Value gets high, less risk is present probably. That's one of the factors. So the value chain, minimize risk, maximize value. If you don't know what you're doing, the risk is always high. So the first thing you worry about in this area is, do I have competent people? Do I have the right resources, the right tools, all that kind of stuff? So I need people who know what they're doing with the right tools and the right resources. Finally, like Freedom to Operate, we're going to ask you to do some work on this value chain. Again, it's going to be pretty simple scale, just and high-level views of what's going on. So don't freak out. Okay, talk to you at the end of the value chain.